everybody. This is Jeannie, and of course, Jeannie, and then Lucy Martinez. She's amazing. I met her in another group, and her story really touched me. I just see her heart, and I see how amazing she is, and I wanted to share her story with all of you, and I hope it's a blessing. We've I kind of know of her through the group, but I don't know a lot about her. So this is why I wanted her to come in and tell her story. And so there you go. Go ahead, take the floor.
Thank
I,
you, Jenny.
you did say
Okay.
you were divorced, so we'll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. And I just wanted to encourage you just with, what I've been able to get through. And so basically, I was raised in pretty much, a secure home, but um, even though it was secure and I was sent to, private school, there was no nurturing in my family. There was no um, affection, I guess I should say. And so I was, pretty much starving for love and, attention as far as nurturing goes. And so I ended up, when I got older in high school, I started dating a guy, and that's when I first started receiving affection, which was obviously, it was dysfunctional because I was receiving it incorrectly, because I was starving for that. And so I ended up basically in the wrong groups. I mean, he was into drugs, and I didn't really care for that, but yet I was receiving attention, the affection. And, from that, I moved forward and I continued to hang around the wrong crowds. And I mean, honestly, only by the grace of God that I did not get into big trouble. I mean, I hung around people that were dealing drugs, basically.
Yeah.
And, I moved forward, and I ended up, when I was 19, a friend of mine took me to church, and I accepted Christ. And so I started walking with the Lord, and um, I was still a baby Christian. I met my kid's dad. I had only been walking with the Lord maybe, I guess I could say 2 years. And, he was about 5 years older than me or so. And, I just, again, the attention that I was, you know, searching for in with the wrong mindset. I ended up getting married to him. And 2 years after we were married, he stops going to church. He starts gambling. He, was drinking. And it was just like, I was thinking, this is not what I signed up for. I said, I even told him to his face, I'm like, you're not the man I married. And so I stuck it out for 13 years, and we ended up, in a horrible divorce, because it was a custody battle. I had 2 children, and it was just, it was so stressful that I lost a lot of weight. I went from being like about, I weighed 135, and I went down to 128, and I was eating, but it was just the stress was making me sick. And after the third time that his attorney reported me to Child Protective Services, and the charges were unfounded, I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I ended up, I just thought, I just can't do this. And so I drove to the beach. I drove to Newport Beach and in California, and had my bathing suit, and I put my towel in the sand, and I walked in the water, and I figured I'm just going to swim till I can't swim anymore. And as soon as I got in the water, it was the weirdest feeling. It was like I got in the water and it felt different. It felt like somebody was hugging me, and I like instantly thought, like, it felt like, all I could think of was God was hugging me. So I floated there for a bit and experienced that, and I was just like,
Wow.
I was thinking, who's going to raise my boys? Who's going to raise them to know Christ? And um, so I ended up getting out of the water, and I dried off, and I drove home and decided to move forward with my life. And um, I had a job previously at a civil engineering office as a secretary, and then so I ended up um, looking forward to gaining another position in a civil engineering office. And so I was able to move forward with um, doing that, and I kind of just moved forward in positions, and which currently I'm a project manager for. I'm managing a project. We're building 71 homes. And I mean, through this time, I've done a lot of self-help reading. I even saw a psychiatrist because I thought, I need to know that I'm not crazy. And I went to this Christian psychologist and our psychiatrist, and he said, you know what, you know what you're talking about. Because I took him the books. I said, I don't understand this.
Mm.
And he would have me explain to him. And he said, you're fine. He said, you understand what you're doing. And so I just continued to move forward and grow in my personal development, and just to have a more, a healthy mindset. So,
Mhm.
and that's where I'm at today, just still working on it.
Right. Wow. I mean, I kind of I can't even imagine being to that point. I mean, I've experienced a lot of pain, but to get on the water and and do that, that's just desperation. A lot of pain, and I just want to understand, like, okay, so because for me, I grew up with parents that were together, but and he was a worship leader at church and everything. And for you, I believe you were Catholic, right?
Right.
So were your parents like always fighting, or what was it that you weren't getting at home? How
Well,
do you
what
feel
I've
about
come
that?
to yeah, what I've come to understand, see, my dad, his mom died when he was 3, and then his dad died when he was 13, so he had to go to work. And so he did not grow up with nurturing.
Mm,
So he wasn't able to give what he didn't have. And my mom, on the other hand, she grew up in a family of 10. And so, her parents were busy.
yeah,
There wasn't time for affection. And so I never really saw them be affectionate with each other, And so that's where I came to understand. At first, I was angry, at my parents. Why didn't they stop me from doing this? Why didn't they, tell me not to date this guy or whatever, and I understand now that they didn't know what they didn't have to
right,
encourage me with.
right. And I feel like, okay, so yeah, and for me, like, I felt like, I mean, definitely as a little girl, we look for our dad's attention because he's the man role. And you, as us little girls, we're looking for our mom nurturing, a lot, and we're watching how they behave. We do. And then when we go into the teenage years, we're looking for love in all the wrong places because we're desperate, starving for someone to validate us and to say that we're good enough and that we're loved. Um, like my mom was nurturing, but my dad wasn't because he was an alcoholic. Um, so I think that
Mm.
the detachment, that bond, if it's not created, is a recipe for disaster because we don't learn how to recognize that in another male. Like you, yeah, like I agree. Like you are so blessed, like obviously your purpose, God give us all purpose, but you are protected because by being with drug, dealing with drugs, anything goes. I mean, were you scared when you were going through that?
You know, I remember there was one time that my car had broken down, and then so I called my friend, and she had her husband come pick me up, and he's all, I'm just going to stop at my friend's house. I'm all, okay. Well, he was stopping to do a drug deal,
Yes.
and the police, it was in a dark street, and the police came from behind us, shined their lights. I mean, they put us in the back of the police car.
Wow.
I think he handcuffed me, but I was just sobbing and crying and sobbing and
Yeah.
crying. And he actually drove me home, took me to my door, and he said, "I'm not going to take you in, but I hope you learn from this." I mean, that was the grace of
That was
God.
mercy. Yes, that was the grace of God. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did I mean, okay, so going back to definitely God was protecting you big time. Um with your divorce, was it like mutual separation? How old were the kids? I mean, did
So
anybody advise you what to do or not to do?
I was so emotionally a wreck. I mean, I was in tears for a year. I remember I was in depression and just crying every day for a year. Um, I didn't get good counsel, and I ended up firing my attorney, and I hired a second one and fired him. It just seemed like they weren't representing me well, and I ended up representing myself, as best I could anyway. And the kids were 6 and like 9,
Mhm.
and it was very difficult with on them.
So did they go with the dad? Is that what threw you over the edge to like go to the ocean? Because the Pacific Ocean is super dark and super cold. So
Yeah.
I mean, right there, I would not even get in because it's so the coldness would kill me, you know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what?
actually, I think it was like July or August is
Mhm.
why, it wasn't as cold. But um, I'm sorry, what was,
But what drove you to that point? Like, you know, is
oh,
it? Yeah.
yeah. So basically they said because my older son, he just wanted to stay with his dad. I mean, his dad really was manipulating him. They said whoever the older son chooses to go with, then the younger son has to go. And my younger son did not want to go with his dad. And so yeah, it was very hard. It was very hard.
Um, how was it hard? Like, were you worried about them splitting up or losing both of them? What was the the clincher for you?
Well, that I knew that he wasn't, you know, being a nurturing dad. He wasn't reading to him every night. He was dating. He was having people babysit them when he wanted to go out, and wouldn't tell me, give me the first option to babysit them. And um, so it was just my kids, my younger son would tell me, where they were at or what they would end up doing. And um, it just was very chaotic.
So what happened that you almost lost them? Or what got how did he get to do that? I mean,
The first time it was, I was at my mom's. I was living at my mom's, and my brother was there. And I wasn't quite sure how this happened, but my older son, his dad gave him an envelope to give to my brother. And apparently it had pornography um, cards in it. And my ex ended up telling the courts that my brother gave my son pornography cards, which was not true. That's not what happened. And my brother was the one that told me, Cameron gave me these. And I was like, what the heck? And so that was the first time. And then that was unfounded because it just, they questioned my brother, and, nothing transpired there, no charges or anything. And then
what a
another,
nightmare.
Yeah, and on top of it, then I had to move out of my parents' house. I couldn't live there. I couldn't have them at my parents' house. It was horrible. And another time, my older son, he was getting out of hand, and I couldn't discipline him. He just wouldn't listen. And so I called the police and I said, okay, well, I'm going to call the police because you're not listening. And so I did. And they, you know, reprimanded him. They were a little bit too harsh on him, I thought, but, that's what happened. And then so he called his dad. That was the second time. They said that I allowed it or whatever, for him
Hmm.
to experience whatever. And it's like, it was law enforcement. I don't understand.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
um, and then the third time, my son, I was trying to read to them at night. I remember, and he was acting up. He didn't want to sit down, and I, went to grab him by his arm, and I said, "Come and sit down." And I had, my fake nails, and it scratched him under his arm, and so he showed his dad, "Mom scratched me." And they went to the sheriff's station, took pictures. It was
Oh
horrible.
my word. Yeah, it's just it gets out of hand, doesn't it? Like it's
Yeah,
just like a snowball, and I mean, and then here's today. You're a strong, beautiful, powerful woman. So, what would you say is a big takeaway of going through all that pain that you could share with others?
well, I would have to say definitely if I had known first off, you know, coming to understand your identity and who you are and the person you are, that you are enough, that you are beautiful, that you are lovable, that other people's shortcomings and other people's insecurities, you don't have to accept, um, to affect you. Um, and you can move forward much quicker than I did and not suffer as long as I did. And that's truly what I want to encourage people with, that um, you can shift your mindset when you have triggers, that you
Mhm.
can stop and say, I refuse to agree with that thought. I
Right.
refuse to accept those words, and shift and move forward. And I
Yeah.
didn't have those tools. And, I totally want to encourage you women with those tools and to learn more and to continue to grow and learn more to become stronger and have a stronger mindset.
Yeah, and it's that is super important. What you just said is about being intentional and really like renewing your mind with all the good things. Like,
Yeah.
I know that your relationship with Jesus is closer than ever, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, that's really our strength. But it's not only that, it takes intention to say, this is not going to take me down. Enough is enough. Greater is he who's in us than he who's in the world. Like, you have to get that word inside of you, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
And you just have to do it and decide that that's what's going to happen, and
Right.
walk every day.
Yes, and there's negative triggers that will come, they'll just come. But I mean, I experienced one like last month at work, and I knew because the guy I work with, he went through a divorce. And
Hmm.
so um there was like, I was walking behind him, and something triggered him, as far as like, because I was like, he went to step back and I was behind him. I go, "Oh, I'm right behind you." And it like triggered him. And his reaction, the words he chose, I understood that was a trigger.
Hmm.
The way he responded, he's still hurting. And so for me, it's helped me to understand where other people are at when they're not healed, when they're not moving forward out of what they experience. So
Hmm.
it's, yeah, definitely a benefit to move forward in understanding this, because then you can actually help other people.
Right. So that's a good lead. Like, I want to know what like, is your purpose now. Like, I know you have a W-2, but are you hoping, what is your hopes and dreams?
Well, my hopes and dreams are, I really desire to have a women's conference. I really desire to hold a women's conference to empower and encourage women, because I live out here in Southern California. The area I live in, people are either their families are south in San Diego an hour or north an hour, and so they're kind of isolated. And so I see, because I've been in a few, visited in a few singles groups, and they're lonely, and they're just isolated from family, because this is where
Yes.
they live.
But not only that, what I found, and this is what really motivates me to do this, divorce but not devalue group, is that there is, like, you go through the divorce process, right? And I come to find out, that we're not divorced women. We've gone through the process, but that's not who we are, right? We are loved and we are free. We're just like an alcoholic. Like, the worst thing they could say is like, "Hi, I'm Jeannie and I'm an alcoholic." I'm not an alcoholic, and I don't drink, but like, I am, that statement of I am, it should be, it's just, they're creating an environment where it's really destructive. But for us as divorced women, there isn't anything out there that is encouraging, and it's creating community, because you have we have been given all these labels out there, and that's not who we are. And it's hard to talk about it. The church is not talking about it. They wanted to just, they want to shove it under the table. um, I think I lost you. Yep, I did. Um,
Oh,
all right,
great.
we're back. So, yeah, so what you're doing, in other words, is a great thing. There's a great need for women to come together and share their stories, and, how we're learning that our message matters. And that's what they need. They need a community where they speak the same language. It's like going to another country. Let's say we go to China, where, like, nobody speaks English, but they kind of do. But let's say in a remote town, and you sit at a restaurant, and all of a sudden the table next to you is speaking English. You're like, "Oh, that's great! You speak English. We can talk." So that's the same feeling, that we need. That we need to just bring that dark to the light, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And just know that, I want to encourage you that, even though you may feel like no one else understands what I'm going through, because I know I did. I feel like nobody understands what I'm experiencing. No one's experienced this. Just know that, okay, yes, that might be true. Everyone's is unique, but yet there's someone else out there that can encourage you, that has experienced a certain amount of it. And choose your circle of friends wisely. Have a small circle of friends that you can
Yes,
trust, and just ask, specifically, that if they would be there for you.
yes. So they can celebrate you and do life together and not tolerate you. Speaking life to each other and praying for each other. So
Right.
good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You are awesome, and I am so proud of you.
Thank you, Jenny.